The February morning arrived cold and gray over Nashville, Tennessee, wrapping the city in a blanket of thick clouds that promised rain but never quite delivered. On the outskirts of the city, far from the neon lights of Broadway and the tourist-filled honky-tonks, sat the Riverside Children's Home, a three-story brick building that had seen better days. The paint on the window frames was peeling, the gutters sagged under the weight of accumulated leaves, and the playground equipment in the backyard had rusted into shades of orange and brown that matched the winter-dead grass. Daniel Hayes sat on the edge of his bed in the dormitory-style room he shared with 5 other boys, his fingers tracing the worn fabric of his navy blue comforter. At 14, he had the lean build of someone who hadn't quite grown into his height yet, with dark brown hair that fell across his forehead and hazel eyes that seemed older than his years. He wore a faded gray hoodie and jeans that were slightly too short at the ankles, donations from a church clothing drive 3 months ago. The room was quiet this Saturday morning. His roommates had gone downstairs for breakfast, their voices and laughter echoing up through the old heating vents. But Daniel remained, as he often did, preferring the solitude to the chaos of the dining hall. On the small nightstand beside his bed sat his most precious possession, a portable CD player that had belonged to his father, along with a collection of country music CDs carefully stored in a cracked plastic case. Daniel picked up the CD player and placed the headphones over his ears. He pressed play, and the familiar opening notes of "Remember When" by Alan Jackson filled his head. He closed his eyes and let the music transport him back 6 years, to a sun-drenched afternoon when he was 8 years old, sitting in the back seat of his parents' Ford pickup truck as they drove through the Tennessee countryside. His father, Robert Hayes, had been singing along off-key while his mother, Linda, laughed and playfully swatted his arm. That had been 3 months before the accident, before the rainy night when a drunk driver ran a red light at the intersection of Charlotte Avenue and 28th Street, before the police officers arrived at his grandmother's house where Daniel was spending the weekend, before his entire world collapsed into a nightmare of funeral arrangements and social workers. A sharp knock on the doorframe startled Daniel back to the present. He opened his eyes to see Jennifer Coleman, one of the home's staff members, standing in the doorway. She was in her mid-30s, with shoulder-length blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and kind blue eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. "Daniel, honey, you need to come downstairs," Jennifer said gently. "Mrs. Patterson wants to talk to all the kids after breakfast." Daniel removed his headphones and nodded, carefully placing the CD player back on the nightstand. "Is everything okay?" Jennifer's smile faltered slightly, and Daniel caught the flash of worry that crossed her face before she composed herself. "Just come down when you're ready, sweetheart." She disappeared down the hallway, leaving Daniel with a knot of anxiety forming in his stomach. In his 6 years at Riverside, he had learned to read the subtle signals that adults gave off when something was wrong. The forced cheerfulness, the carefully chosen words, the way they avoided direct eye contact, all signs that bad news was coming. He made his way downstairs, his sneakers squeaking against the linoleum floors that had been mopped so many times the pattern had worn away in places. The dining hall was a large room with long tables and mismatched chairs, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The walls were decorated with artwork created by the children, crayon drawings and watercolor paintings that brought spots of color to the otherwise institutional space. About 30 children ranging from ages 5 to 17 sat at the tables, their breakfast plates pushed aside. The younger kids fidgeted restlessly, while the older ones wore expressions of wary anticipation. Daniel slid into a seat near the back, next to Kevin Miller, a 15-year-old with red hair and freckles who had arrived at Riverside 2 years ago. "You know what this is about?" Kevin whispered. Daniel shook his head. At the front of the room, Director Patricia Patterson stood beside a metal folding chair. her hands clasped in front of her. She was a woman in her late 50s with gray hair cut in a practical bob and glasses that she constantly adjusted when she was nervous. She had run Riverside Children's Home for 12 years, dedicating her life to giving children a safe place to live when their own families couldn't. "Good morning, everyone," Mrs. Patterson began, her voice steady but lacking its usual warmth. "I know Saturday mornings are your free time, and I apologize for interrupting, but I need to talk to you all about something important." The room fell silent. Even the youngest children seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Mrs. Patterson took a deep breath. "As you know, Riverside Children's Home is funded through a combination of state assistance, private donations, and fundraising events. For many years, we've been able to provide a home for children who need us. However, over the past 18 months, our funding has been significantly reduced. The state cut our budget by 30% last year, and several of our major donors have had to reduce their contributions due to their own financial difficulties." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He knew what was coming. "I've spent the last 6 months working with our board of directors to find solutions," Mrs. Patterson continued, her voice growing thicker with emotion. "We've cut costs everywhere we can. We've reached out to new potential donors. We've applied for grants. But despite our best efforts, we're facing a serious financial crisis. If we cannot raise $250,000 by the end of May, Riverside Children's Home will have to close its doors." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. A little girl in the front row, 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez, began to cry. Jennifer Coleman moved quickly to comfort her. "What happens to us?" asked Tyler Bennett, a 12-year-old boy with dark skin and close-cropped hair. Mrs. Patterson's eyes glistened with tears she was fighting to hold back. "If we have to close, we'll work with social services to find placements for each of you. Some of you might go to other group homes. Some might be placed with foster families. We will do everything in our power to make sure each of you has a safe place to go." "But we'll be split up," Kevin said, his voice cracking. "This is our home." "I know," Mrs. Patterson said softly. "I know this is your home, and I know many of you have formed bonds here that are like family. That's why I haven't given up. We still have 3.5 months, and I'm committed to exploring every possible avenue to save Riverside. But I wanted to be honest with you about our situation, because you deserve to know the truth." The meeting ended with Mrs. Patterson encouraging everyone to stay positive and promising to keep them updated. But as the children dispersed, the atmosphere in the home had changed. The usual Saturday morning energy, kids playing board games in the common room, shooting baskets outside, or watching cartoons, was replaced by an anxious quiet. Daniel returned to his room and sat on his bed, his mind racing. Riverside wasn't perfect. The building was old, the resources were limited, and there were never enough staff members to give each child the individual attention they deserved. But it was the only stable home Daniel had known since his parents died. The thought of being sent somewhere else, of starting over again with strangers, filled him with a dread so deep it made him feel physically sick. He reached for his CD player again, needing the comfort of music to quiet his thoughts. As Alan Jackson's voice filled his ears singing, "Where were you when the world stopped turning?" Daniel was struck by a memory so vivid it was almost painful. He was 9 years old, about a year after arriving at Riverside. It had been a particularly difficult day. He had gotten into a fight with another boy who had made fun of him for being quiet, and he had spent the afternoon in Mrs. Patterson's office feeling ashamed and angry at the world. That evening, Jennifer had found him sitting alone in the backyard and sat down beside him. "What helps you when you're feeling bad?" she had asked. "Music," Daniel had answered. "My dad's music." "Then maybe that's your superpower," Jennifer had said with a smile. When the world feels too heavy, you have something that can lift you up. That's a gift, Daniel. Now, sitting in his room with the weight of the home's potential closure pressing down on him, Daniel wondered if music could be more than just an escape. Could it actually help? Could it be a way to save Riverside? An idea began to form in his mind. Wild, probably impossible, but an idea nonetheless. His heart started beating faster as he thought it through. He knew it was a long shot, maybe even foolish. But what was the alternative? Sitting around waiting for the inevitable? Daniel pulled out a notebook from his backpack and opened to a blank page. His hand trembled slightly as he wrote at the top, "Dear Mr. Jackson." He stared at those 3 words for a long moment, then began to write. The rain that had threatened all morning finally arrived on Sunday afternoon, drumming against the windows of Riverside Children's Home with a steady rhythm that matched Daniel's nervous heartbeat. He sat at one of the tables in the common room, surrounded by crumpled pieces of paper. Failed attempts at writing the letter that now lay before him in its 7th draft. Daniel had spent all of Saturday night and most of Sunday morning trying to find the right words. How did you write to someone famous? How did you explain the desperate situation without sounding like you were begging? How did you make your voice heard among what must be thousands of fan letters that Alan Jackson received? The current draft was 2 pages long, handwritten in Daniel's careful print. He read through it one more time, his lips moving silently as he absorbed each word. Dear Mr. Jackson, my name is Daniel Hayes, and I'm 14 years old. I live at Riverside Children's Home in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm writing to you because I don't know who else to turn to, and because your music has meant more to me than you could ever know. I came to Riverside 6 years ago after my parents died in a car accident. My dad loved country music, especially your songs. Some of my best memories are of riding in his truck, listening to him sing along to Chattahoochee and It's 5 o'clock somewhere. When I miss my parents, which is every day, I listen to your CDs and I feel close to them again. I'm writing because Riverside is in trouble. Our director, Mrs. Patterson, told us yesterday that if we can't raise $250,000 by the end of May, the home will have to close. About 30 kids live here, and this is the only real home most of us have known. We're all scared about what will happen to us if Riverside closes. I know you're a very busy person, and you probably get thousands of letters. I'm not writing to ask for money. What I'm asking is bigger than that, but also maybe simpler. Some of us kids have been talking about organizing a fundraising event to help save Riverside. We thought if we could get local businesses involved and maybe some media attention, we might be able to raise some of the money we need. Here's my request. Would you consider coming to Riverside to perform at our fundraising event? I know it's a lot to ask, but if someone like you showed up, people would pay attention. They would come. They would care about what happens to us. I'm not very good at talking to people or standing up in front of crowds, but I'm good at listening to music and understanding what it means. Your songs are about real life, real people, and real struggles. That's us. We're real kids who need help, and I believe that if you knew our story, you might want to help tell it. Even if you can't come, thank you for the music. Thank you for giving me a way to remember my dad and feel less alone. Respectfully, Daniel Hayes. At the bottom of the letter, Daniel had carefully written the address of Riverside Children's Home and Mrs. Patterson's phone number. What are you working on? Daniel looked up to find Chloe Anderson standing beside the table. She was 13, with curly brown hair pulled into a high ponytail and bright green eyes that were always observing everything. Chloe had been at Riverside for 4 years and had a reputation for being both smart and bluntly honest. Nothing, Daniel said automatically, moving to cover the letter with his arm. Chloe raised an eyebrow. You've been sitting here for hours. And you've filled the trash can with crumpled paper. That doesn't look like nothing." Daniel hesitated. He hadn't told anyone about his plan, partly because he was afraid of being laughed at, and partly because he wanted to protect himself from disappointment if nothing came of it. But Chloe had a way of seeing through people's defenses. "I wrote a letter," he admitted quietly, "to Alan Jackson." Chloe pulled out a chair and sat down. "The country singer?" "Yeah." "What did you write about?" Daniel took a deep breath and slid the letter across the table. "You can read it if you want." Chloe picked up the pages and read silently, her expression serious. When she finished, she looked at Daniel with something that might have been respect. "This is really good, Daniel. It's honest. You think it's stupid?" he asked. "No," Chloe said firmly. "I think it's brave. But do you really think he'll respond? I mean, he's famous. He probably has people who screen his mail." "I know the odds aren't great," Daniel admitted. "But what else can we do? Mrs. Patterson is trying everything she can think of, and it's not enough. Maybe we need to try something different." Chloe nodded slowly. "If you're serious about organizing a fundraising event, you're going to need help. You can't do this alone." "I don't even know where to start," Daniel confessed. "I just thought if I could get him to come, everything else would fall into place." "That's backwards," Chloe said with a slight smile. "You need to show him that you're serious, that you have a real plan. Otherwise, even if he reads your letter, he might think it's just a nice idea with no follow-through." She had a point. Daniel chewed his lip, thinking, what would a real plan look like? Chloe's eyes lit up with the kind of energy she got when presented with a problem to solve. "Okay, let's think about this. If we're going to do a fundraising event, we need a venue. We need other entertainment besides just hoping Alan Jackson shows up. We need food and drinks. We need publicity. And we need people to actually come and donate money." "That sounds impossible," Daniel said, feeling his brief surge of hope deflating. "It sounds like a lot of work," Chloe corrected. "But we have 30 kids here, plus staff who might help. We have 3.5 months, and we live in Nashville, Music City. There have to be resources we can tap into." Over the next hour, more kids drifted into the common room and noticed Chloe and Daniel huddled over papers and notebooks. Kevin Miller approached first, curious about what they were doing. Then Tyler Bennett joined, followed by 16-year-old Ashley Ford, a quiet girl with artistic talent, who immediately volunteered to design flyers and posters. By the time dinner was called, a small group of 7 kids had gathered around the table, each offering ideas and skills. The plan was still rough, but it was taking shape. They would call it Save Riverside, a community music festival. They would approach local musicians about performing for free. They would ask local businesses to sponsor the event or donate items for a silent auction. They would reach out to news stations about covering the story. And Daniel would send his letter to Alan Jackson, not as a desperate plea, but as an invitation to be part of something meaningful. Jennifer Coleman noticed the group's excitement at dinner and pulled Chloe aside afterward. "What's going on with you kids? You all seem energized about something." Chloe glanced at Daniel, who gave a small nod. "We're planning a fundraiser to help save Riverside. We wanted to work out some details before bringing it to Mrs. Patterson." Jennifer's expression softened. "That's wonderful, Chloe. But honey, you know Mrs. Patterson and the board have been working on fundraising for months. What makes you think you kids can make a difference?" "Because we have something they don't," Chloe said confidently. "We're the kids who will lose our home if Riverside closes. Our story matters. People might not care about budget numbers and board meetings, but they'll care about us, if we can find a way to reach them." Jennifer studied the group of children, seeing the determination in their faces. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll set up a meeting with Mrs. Patterson for tomorrow after school." You can present your ideas to her, but I want you all to understand something. No matter what happens, no matter whether this plan works or not, you are not responsible for saving Riverside. The adults in your lives should be taking care of you, not the other way around. We know, Daniel said quietly, but we still want to try. That night, Daniel carefully folded his letter and placed it in an envelope. He had looked up the address for Alan Jackson's management company online using the computer in Mrs. Patterson's office. The address was in Nashville. A good sign, Daniel thought. At least the letter wouldn't have far to travel. On Monday morning before school, Daniel walked 3 blocks to the post office. The clerk, an older man with a gray mustache, weighed the envelope and told Daniel it would cost 2 stamps. Daniel handed over the $1 he had been saving from his small monthly allowance. As he watched the clerk toss his envelope into a large mail bin, Daniel felt a mix of hope and terror. He had done something. He had taken action. But now the waiting began. And waiting had always been the hardest part. At school that day, Daniel found it nearly impossible to concentrate on his classes. His math teacher, Mr. Phillips, had to call his name 3 times before Daniel realized he was being asked to solve a problem on the board. During lunch, Kevin sat beside him in the cafeteria. "You sent it?" Kevin asked. "Yeah," Daniel confirmed. "How long do you think it'll take to hear back?" Daniel shrugged. "Maybe never. Maybe weeks. I don't know." "Well, even if he doesn't respond, I think what you wrote was cool," Kevin said. "I couldn't have done that." After school, the group of kids who had gathered on Sunday met with Mrs. Patterson in her office. The director listened carefully as Chloe presented their ideas, with Daniel, Ashley, Tyler, and the others chiming in with additional details. Mrs. Patterson's expression was difficult to read, a mixture of pride, concern, and exhaustion. When they finished, Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a long moment. "I think this is one of the most touching things anyone has ever done for Riverside," she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "The fact that you all care so much about this place, that you want to fight for it, that means everything to me." "So we can do it?" Chloe asked eagerly. "Yes," Mrs. Patterson said, "but with some conditions. First, I need you to promise that you won't neglect your schoolwork. Your education comes first. Second, I want Jennifer to supervise and coordinate with you. She can help you reach out to local businesses and handle any communications with adults. Third, I need you all to understand that even if this fundraiser is successful, it might not be enough to save Riverside. The financial gap is significant. I don't want you to feel like you've failed if we still have to close." "We understand," Daniel said, "but we have to try." Mrs. Patterson smiled, though her eyes were wet with tears. "Then you have my full support. Let's save our home." 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. February melted into March, bringing warmer temperatures and the first hints of spring to Nashville. The trees around Riverside began to bud, and the afternoon light lasted a little longer each day. But inside the children's home, the kids barely noticed the changing season. They were too busy working on their fundraising event. The common room had been transformed into a planning headquarters. One wall was covered with a large calendar marking important deadlines. Another wall displayed Ashley Ford's design for the event poster, a colorful illustration of musical notes floating above a simple drawing of the Riverside building, with bold letters announcing Save Riverside, a community music festival, Saturday, May the 17th. Jennifer Coleman had helped the kids secure a location for the event, Centennial Park, one of Nashville's most popular public spaces, featuring wide open lawns, perfect for a festival atmosphere. The park administration had agreed to waive the usual rental fee when they heard about the cause. Chloe had created a spreadsheet tracking their outreach efforts. They had contacted 47 local businesses, resulting in 12 sponsors who pledged financial support or donated items for a silent auction. Tyler and Kevin had reached out to 5 up-and-coming country musicians through social media, and 2 had agreed to perform for free. But there was still no word from Alan Jackson. Daniel tried not to obsess over it, but he couldn't help checking the mail every single day when he got home from school. Each time there was nothing, he felt a pang of disappointment that he tried to hide from the others. They had built a solid foundation for the fundraiser without him, he reminded himself. They didn't need Alan Jackson for the event to happen, but they needed something big to draw a real crowd. And everyone knew it. It was a Tuesday afternoon in mid-March when everything changed. Daniel was in the backyard helping some of the younger kids plant flowers in the garden boxes, a project Jennifer had organized to brighten up the grounds, when he heard someone calling his name. "Daniel! Daniel Hayes!" He looked up to see Mrs. Patterson standing on the back porch, waving at him urgently. Her face was flushed, and she was clutching her cell phone. Daniel's heart jumped. He set down his trowel and jogged across the lawn, his shoes squelching in the damp grass. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Mrs. Patterson said, and Daniel realized she was smiling, actually smiling, bigger than he had seen in months. "Daniel, I have someone on the phone who wants to talk to you." She held out the phone. Daniel stared at it, confused. "Who is it?" "Just take it," Mrs. Patterson urged. Daniel accepted the phone with a trembling hand and raised it to his ear. "Hello? Hi there. Is this Daniel Hayes?" The voice on the other end was male, warm, with a distinct Southern accent. "Yes, sir. This is Daniel." "Daniel, my name is Alan Jackson." For a moment, Daniel forgot how to breathe. The world seemed to tilt slightly, and he had to grip the porch railing for support. "Mr. Jackson?" "That's right. I got your letter, son. I have to tell you, I receive a lot of mail, but your letter stood out. It was honest and heartfelt, and it moved me." Daniel's mind was racing so fast he could barely form words. I didn't think. I hoped, but I didn't actually think you'd call." Alan Jackson chuckled, a kind sound. "Well, I had my assistant track down the number for Riverside, and I spoke with Mrs. Patterson for a few minutes. She told me about what you kids are organizing. This music festival fundraiser? That's pretty impressive." "We're trying," Daniel managed to say. "We're all really scared about losing our home." "I understand that," Alan said, his voice becoming more serious. "And I want you to know that what you're doing, taking action, trying to make a difference, that takes real courage. A lot of people twice your age wouldn't have the guts to do what you're doing." "Thank you, sir," Daniel said quietly. There was a pause on the line, and Daniel could hear papers rustling. "Daniel, I've been thinking about your request. My schedule is pretty packed, as you might imagine. But I checked with my manager, and it turns out I have the weekend of May 17th free, which I understand is when you're planning your festival." Daniel's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Yes, sir. That's the date." "Well, I'd like to accept your invitation. I'll come to your festival and perform a few songs. No charge, of course. I just want to help you kids out." Daniel's legs gave out, and he sat down hard on the porch steps. Mrs. Patterson, who had been watching anxiously, immediately moved to his side. "Daniel? Are you okay?" He said yes, Daniel whispered, looking up at her with tears streaming down his face. He said, "He'll come." Mrs. Patterson pressed her hand to her mouth, her own eyes filling with tears. "Daniel, you still there?" Alan's voice came through the phone. "Yes, sir, I'm here," Daniel said, wiping his face with his sleeve. "I'm sorry, I can't believe this is happening." "Believe it," Alan said warmly. "Now, I'll have my team reach out to Mrs. Patterson to work out the details. Technical requirements for the sound system, timing, all that logistical stuff. But I wanted to call you personally because your letter deserved a personal response. Mr. Jackson, I don't know how to thank you, Daniel said. You already did in your letter. You shared your story with me and you asked for help. That's more than enough. I'm looking forward to meeting you, Daniel, and all the other kids at Riverside. After the call ended, Daniel sat on the porch steps for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Mrs. Patterson sat beside him, her arm around his shoulders. You did this, she said softly. You took a chance, and it paid off. We still have to make the festival successful, Daniel said, always practical even in moments of triumph. We still have to raise the money. We will, Mrs. Patterson said with certainty. With Alan Jackson performing, people will come. This changes everything. News of Alan Jackson's commitment spread through Riverside like wildfire. Within an hour, every child and staff member knew, and the atmosphere in the home transformed overnight. The anxious, defeated mood that had hung over them since February was replaced with excited energy and renewed hope. Chloe immediately updated their outreach strategy. With Alan Jackson confirmed, we can go back to all the businesses that turned us down before, she said, her eyes bright with determination. We can pitch bigger sponsorship packages. We can sell tickets instead of just asking for donations at the door. Jennifer helped them draft a press release, which they sent to every local news outlet in Nashville. The response was immediate. On Thursday afternoon, a reporter and cameraman from WTVF News Channel 5 came to Riverside to interview Daniel and Mrs. Patterson. Daniel had never been on camera before, and he was terrified. He stood in the backyard with the reporter, a woman in her 30s named Jessica Reynolds, who asked him about the letter and why he had decided to reach out to Alan Jackson. I just thought about how my dad used to play his music, Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. And I thought about how music has helped me through really hard times. I figured if Mr. Jackson's music could help me feel less alone, maybe he was the kind of person who would care about kids like us. What does it mean to you that he said yes? Jessica asked. Daniel thought carefully about his answer. It means someone believes we're worth fighting for. It means our home matters. And it gives all of us hope that maybe we can actually save Riverside. The segment aired on the Friday evening news. Daniel sat in the common room with a dozen other kids, watching himself on the screen. He cringed at how nervous he looked, but the others were enthusiastic. You were great, Chloe insisted. You came across as genuine and sincere. The news coverage had an immediate impact. By Saturday morning, Mrs. Patterson had received over 40 phone calls from people wanting to buy tickets to the festival or make donations. Local businesses that hadn't responded to their initial outreach were now calling to ask how they could get involved. The Nashville community newspaper, The Tennessean, ran a feature story on Sunday with the headline, Orphan's Letter Inspires Country Star to Help Save Children's Home. The article included Daniel's full letter and quotes from Alan Jackson's publicist confirming his participation in the event. On Monday morning at school, Daniel found himself the center of attention for the first time in his life. Classmates who had never spoken to him before approached to ask about the festival. His English teacher, Mrs. Campbell, asked him to share the story with the class. What you've done is a perfect example of the power of communication, Mrs. Campbell told the class after Daniel had finished speaking. Daniel identified a problem, found his voice, and used it to create change. That's something we should all aspire to. The praise made Daniel uncomfortable. He didn't feel like a hero or an example of anything. He had just written a letter because he didn't know what else to do. But as he looked around at his classmates' faces, some impressed, some inspired. He realized that maybe Chloe had been right all along. Their story mattered. People did care. Over the next 2 weeks, the festival planning intensified. Alan Jackson's production team had visited Centennial Park to assess the space and plan the stage setup. They would need professional sound equipment, lighting, and security, all of which was being donated or provided at cost by local companies who wanted to support the cause. 4 more musical acts had signed on to perform, creating a full afternoon of entertainment. The silent auction had grown to include over 60 donated items, from gift certificates to local restaurants to a signed guitar from a famous Nashville recording studio. Chloe had organized a committee to handle ticket sales, which were going well. They had already sold over 300 advance tickets at $25 each. But the most significant development came in early April, when Alan Jackson's publicist called Mrs. Patterson with unexpected news. "Mr. Jackson has been talking about your fundraiser with some of his friends in the industry," the publicist explained. "Several other artists have expressed interest in participating. Would you be open to expanding the festival?" Mrs. Patterson called an emergency meeting with the kids. "This could be huge for us," she explained. "But it also means more work, more coordination, more logistics. What do you think?" "We do it," Chloe said immediately. And the others nodded in agreement. "Then we do it," Mrs. Patterson said with a smile. By mid-April, the Save Riverside Music Festival had grown beyond anything Daniel had imagined when he wrote his simple letter. 7 musical acts were now confirmed, including 2 Grammy-winning country artists who had agreed to perform short sets. Ticket sales had surpassed 800, and they were projecting a crowd of over 1,000 people. Corporate sponsors had stepped up as well. A local bank had donated $10,000 and was covering the cost of all the sound and lighting equipment. A Nashville-based hotel chain had purchased a platinum sponsorship package for $5,000. Donations were coming in through a website that Jennifer had helped them set up, with contributions ranging from $10 to $500. One evening in late April, Mrs. Patterson gathered all the kids in the common room to share an update. "I wanted you all to know where we stand financially," she said. "Between ticket sales, sponsorships, and donations, we have raised approximately $137,000. Cheers erupted in the room, but Mrs. Patterson held up her hand. "That's incredible progress, and you should all be so proud. But I also want to be realistic with you. We still need to raise another $113,000 by the end of May. The festival is our biggest opportunity, but we can't stop there. We need to keep pushing, keep reaching out, keep telling our story." Daniel felt the weight of those numbers settle on his shoulders. They had come so far, but the finish line was still out of reach. That night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to his roommate's quiet breathing. He thought about his letter, about the moment he had decided to write it. He had been afraid. Afraid of looking stupid. Afraid of being rejected. Afraid of hoping for something that seemed impossible. But he had written it anyway, and that single act had set everything in motion. Maybe that was the real lesson, Daniel thought. You didn't have to know if you would succeed. You just had to be brave enough to try. Saturday, May the 17th, dawned bright and clear over Nashville. The kind of perfect spring day that felt like a gift. Daniel woke at 5:30 in the morning, too nervous and excited to sleep any longer. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky in shades of pink and orange, and birds were singing in the trees outside the dormitory window. He got dressed quietly, careful not to wake his roommates, though Kevin stirred and opened one eye. "Is it time?" Kevin mumbled. "Not yet," Daniel whispered. "Go back to sleep. I'm just going to get some air." But Kevin sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Are you kidding? I'm not sleeping through this day." Within minutes, all 6 boys in the room were awake, their nervous energy contagious. They made their way downstairs to find that most of Riverside was already up. The kitchen was bustling with activity, as staff members and some of the older kids prepared breakfast. The air smelled of coffee, bacon, and pancakes. Mrs. Patterson stood at the counter going over a massive checklist on her clipboard. When she saw Daniel, she smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes. How are you feeling?" "Terrified," Daniel admitted. "That's perfectly normal," Mrs. Patterson assured him. "But remember, we've prepared for this. Everything is organized, everyone knows their role, and we have dozens of volunteers ready to help. Today is going to be wonderful." Jennifer Coleman entered the kitchen carrying several boxes of Save Riverside t-shirts that had been printed with donations from a local printing company. The shirts were royal blue with white lettering and the same musical note design that Ashley had created for the posters. "Everyone associated with Riverside needs to wear one of these today," Jennifer announced. "We want people to know who we are." At 8 o'clock, a convoy of cars and vans left Riverside, carrying kids, staff members, supplies, and equipment to Centennial Park. The festival wasn't set to begin until noon, but they needed time to set up registration tables, arrange the silent auction items, and coordinate with the various vendors and performers. When they arrived at the park, Daniel was amazed by the transformation. The area near the Parthenon, Nashville's full-scale replica of the ancient Greek temple, had been designated for the festival. A large professional stage had been erected, complete with sound towers and lighting rigs. Rows of folding chairs faced the stage, with space behind for people to stand or spread blankets on the grass. Tents had been set up for registration, merchandise sales, and the silent auction. The Save Riverside banner hung across the front of the stage, and Ashley's poster design had been enlarged and printed on vinyl signs placed around the festival area. Everything looked official, professional, and real in a way that made Daniel's heart race. "We actually did this," Chloe said, appearing beside him. Her curly hair was pulled back in a braid, and she wore her Save Riverside shirt with pride. "We made this happen." "We're not done yet," Daniel reminded her. "We still need people to show up and donate." "They'll come," Chloe said confidently. "Trust me." The morning passed in a controlled chaos of preparation. Tyler and Kevin helped arrange chairs. Ashley supervised the setup of the silent auction, making sure each item was properly displayed with bid sheets. Younger kids filled water bottles and organized snacks for the volunteers. Jennifer coordinated with the sound technicians and stage managers, ensuring everything would run smoothly once the performances began. At 10:30, Alan Jackson's tour bus pulled into the parking area near the stage. Daniel's stomach did a flip. This was really happening. The man he had written to, the voice that had helped him through his darkest days, was actually here. Mrs. Patterson found Daniel and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Mr. Jackson would like to meet you before the festival starts. Are you ready?" Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. They walked to the bus together, where a security guard checked their names against a list before allowing them to approach. The bus door opened, and Alan Jackson stepped out, wearing jeans, a button-down shirt, and his signature cowboy hat. He was tall, with a friendly face, and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "You must be Daniel," Alan said, extending his hand. Daniel shook it, feeling like he was in a dream. "Yes, sir. Thank you so much for coming. I can't tell you what this means to us." "I'm honored to be here," Alan said sincerely. "Can you give me a tour? I'd like to see what you kids have put together." For the next 20 minutes, Daniel walked Alan Jackson through the festival setup, explaining each component. Alan listened attentively, asking questions and expressing genuine interest in the silent auction items and the other performers' schedules. "This is incredibly impressive," Alan said as they finished the tour. "The level of organization, the attention to detail. This is professional-level event planning. And you're how old? 14, Daniel said. 14, Alan repeated, shaking his head with admiration. When I was 14, I was worried about baseball and girls. You're out here trying to save your home. That's remarkable. They returned to the stage area, where Alan's band was doing sound check. The sound of electric guitar and drums echoed across the park, and Daniel felt goosebumps rise on his arms. This was really happening. At 11:30, people began to arrive. At first it was a trickle. Families with children, couples, groups of friends carrying blankets and coolers. But by noon, when the festival was officially scheduled to begin, the crowd had swelled to several hundred people, with more streaming in every minute. Daniel stood near the registration tent, watching in awe as volunteers handed out programs and directed people to parking. He recognized some faces from news coverage, reporters and photographers documenting the event, but most were ordinary Nashville residents who had heard about Riverside's story and wanted to help. The festival opened with speeches from Mrs. Patterson and the mayor of Nashville, who praised the children's initiative and urged the community to support them. Then the music began. The first act was a local high school bluegrass band, energetic and talented, who got the crowd clapping and tapping their feet. They were followed by Melissa Wright, a rising singer-songwriter who performed a moving set of original songs about home and belonging. Between acts, volunteers circulated through the crowd with donation buckets, and the response was generous. People stuffed bills into the buckets, 5s, 10s, 20s, even some 50s and hundreds. The silent auction was drawing intense interest, with people returning multiple times to raise their bids. Daniel tried to stay busy, helping wherever he was needed, but he couldn't stop his eyes from drifting to the stage. Each performance was excellent, building momentum and keeping the crowd engaged. By mid-afternoon, the attendance had surpassed 1,000 people, filling the lawn and spilling out into the surrounding park areas. At 4 o'clock, as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Mrs. Patterson took the stage again. The crowd quieted, sensing something significant was about to happen. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice amplified across the park, "we have saved our headliner for last. This is the man who inspired this entire event, who responded to a heartfelt letter from a 14-year-old boy with generosity and grace. This is a man who didn't have to be here, but chose to be here because he believes in giving back to his community and helping children in need. Please welcome Alan Jackson." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers as Alan walked onto the stage, guitar in hand. He waved, waited for the noise to settle, and then spoke. "Thank you all for coming out today," Alan said. "Before I sing, I want to talk about why I'm here. A few months ago, I received a letter from a young man named Daniel Hayes. Daniel, where are you? Can you come up here for a second?" Daniel's heart stopped. Chloe grabbed his arm and pushed him forward. "Go!" she hissed. On shaky legs, Daniel made his way through the crowd and up the steps to the stage. The applause was overwhelming, disorienting. Alan put an arm around his shoulders. "Daniel wrote to me about Riverside Children's Home and the kids who live there," Alan continued. "He didn't ask for money. He asked for something more important. He asked for attention, for someone to notice and care about what was happening to his home. That letter showed me the power of speaking up, of having the courage to ask for help when you need it." Alan looked down at Daniel. "You did this, son. You gave these kids hope, and you rallied a community. That's something to be proud of." The crowd applauded again, and Daniel felt tears streaming down his face. Alan squeezed his shoulder and nodded toward the steps, allowing Daniel to return to the crowd. What followed was an incredible 45-minute set of Alan Jackson's greatest hits. He performed Chattahoochee, and the entire crowd sang along. He played Remember When, and Daniel closed his eyes, feeling his father's presence. He performed It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere, Gone, and Drive, each song perfectly delivered and received with enthusiasm. For the final song, Alan slowed things down. This last one is dedicated to all the kids at Riverside, he said. It's called Small Town Southern Man, and it's about the importance of home and family. Not the family you're born with necessarily, but the family you create. As the song played, Daniel looked around at the crowd. He saw families dancing, couples swaying, and strangers with their arms around each other, connected by music and shared purpose. He saw his fellow Riverside residents scattered throughout the audience, all wearing their blue t-shirts, all crying or smiling, or both. When the set ended, the crowd gave Alan a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. He took a bow, waved, and left the stage to thunderous applause. As the sun set over Centennial Park, the festival began to wind down. The final tallies were being calculated. Ticket sales, donations, silent auction proceeds, and sponsor contributions. Mrs. Patterson gathered the Riverside kids together near the registration tent, her face glowing with exhaustion and happiness. "I don't have final numbers yet," she said, "but I can tell you that today was extraordinary. You children accomplished something incredible. No matter what the final count is, you should know that you fought for your home with everything you had." Jennifer approached with a tablet, showing Mrs. Patterson something on the screen. Daniel watched as the director's eyes widened and her hand flew to her mouth. "What is it?" Chloe asked. "How much did we raise?" Mrs. Patterson looked at the children, tears streaming down her face. $247,000. For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then chaos erupted. Kids screaming, crying, hugging each other and the staff members. Daniel stood in the center of it all, feeling like his heart might burst. They had done it. They had actually done it. The weeks following the festival passed in a blur of media attention, thank you letters, and careful financial planning. The $247,000 raised at the festival, combined with the $137,000 they had accumulated before the event, meant that Riverside Children's Home had not only met their goal, but exceeded it by more than $100,000. Mrs. Patterson worked with the board of directors to allocate the funds strategically. The immediate crisis was addressed. Bills were paid, staff salaries were secured through the end of the year, and essential repairs to the building were scheduled. But they also put aside money for a reserve fund to prevent future emergencies and began discussions about long-term sustainability. The media coverage of the festival had drawn attention from philanthropists and foundations across Tennessee. In late May, the Patterson Foundation, no relation to Mrs. Patterson, though she joked about it, announced a 3-year grant to Riverside totaling $500,000, specifically designated for programming, education support, and facility improvements. We believe that what these children accomplished demonstrates the potential that exists when young people are given support and opportunity, the Foundation's director said in a press release. Riverside Children's Home is clearly an organization worth investing in. Satanandrest. For Daniel, the aftermath of the festival brought changes he hadn't anticipated. His story had resonated with people far beyond Nashville. He received letters from children in other states who were inspired by his courage to speak up. Local civic organizations invited him to speak at their events about advocacy and community engagement. But the most significant change was internal. Daniel, who had always been quiet and withdrawn, found himself developing confidence he didn't know he possessed. When teachers called on him in class, he no longer felt paralyzed with anxiety. When other kids at Riverside came to him with problems or ideas, he listened and helped them think through solutions. One afternoon in early June, Daniel was sitting in the backyard reading when Mrs. Patterson came outside and settled into the lawn chair beside him. "Beautiful day," she observed. "Yeah," Daniel agreed, setting down his book, a biography of Johnny Cash that Jennifer had bought him. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened," Mrs. Patterson said, "and I wanted to talk to you about something. Riverside is stable now financially, but we still have work to do to ensure we stay that way. I'd like to establish a youth advisory council, a group of kids who help make decisions about programs, activities, and even some budgetary priorities." Daniel nodded. "That sounds like a good idea. I'd like you to lead it," Mrs. Patterson said. Daniel turned to look at her, surprised. "Me? Wouldn't Chloe be better? She's the organized one." "Chloe is excellent at logistics," Mrs. Patterson agreed. "And she'll be part of the council. But Daniel, you have something just as valuable. You have vision and you have heart. You see what needs to be done, and you're not afraid to take the first step, even when you don't know if it'll work. That's leadership." Daniel thought about this. "I don't know if I'm a leader," he said honestly. "Neither did I when I first became director of Riverside," Mrs. Patterson said with a smile. "But I learned, and you will too. The question is whether you're willing to try." Daniel looked out across the backyard, where younger kids were playing on the newly repaired swings and slide, repairs funded by the festival money. He thought about his letter to Alan Jackson, about how terrified he had been to mail it. "Okay," he said, "I'll try." The Youth Advisory Council held its first meeting in mid-June. Along with Daniel and Chloe, the group included Kevin Miller, Ashley Ford, Tyler Bennett, and two other kids, 15-year-old Jordan Wright and 16-year-old Emily Sanders. They met weekly with Mrs. Patterson and Jennifer to discuss issues ranging from meal planning to homework help to recreational activities. One of their first major projects was organizing a community service program where Riverside kids volunteered at other organizations around Nashville, food banks, animal shelters, and environmental cleanup efforts. Daniel had proposed the idea, arguing that since the community had helped them, they should give back. "We received help when we needed it," he told the group. "That means we understand what it feels like. And we should help others who are struggling too." The program was implemented in July and became one of Riverside's most popular activities, with kids signing up enthusiastically to participate in various volunteer opportunities. In August, something unexpected happened. Daniel received a phone call from Alan Jackson's publicist. "Mr. Jackson was wondering if you'd be interested in attending one of his concerts," the publicist said. "He's performing at the Grand Ole Opry next Saturday, and he'd like to invite you and a few friends from Riverside as his guests. Backstage passes, the whole experience." Daniel could barely respond. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. He's been following the news about Riverside and is impressed with what you kids have continued to do. He wants to stay connected." The following Saturday, Daniel, Chloe, Kevin, and Mrs. Patterson attended Alan Jackson's concert at the legendary Grand Ole Opry. They sat in a special box section with a perfect view of the stage, and the experience was magical. But the highlight came after the show, when they were escorted backstage to Alan's dressing room. "Daniel!" Alan greeted him warmly, pulling him into a hug. "It's great to see you again. How's everything at Riverside?" "Really good," Daniel said. "Better than we ever imagined, thanks to you." "Thanks to you," Alan corrected. "I just showed up. You did the hard work." They talked for nearly an hour. Alan asked about the Youth Advisory Council and the Community Service Program, and he shared stories about his own childhood in rural Georgia and the importance of giving back. Before they left, Alan gave Daniel a signed guitar, the same one he had played during the festival. "Keep making a difference," Alan said. "And keep in touch. I mean that." As the summer drew to a close and a new school year approached, Daniel found himself reflecting on the past 6 months. Life at Riverside had returned to a comfortable routine, but it was different now, more stable, more hopeful. The building had been repainted, new playground equipment had been installed, and plans were underway for an expanded computer lab to help kids with homework and college applications. But more than the physical improvements, there was a shift in how the kids saw themselves. They weren't just recipients of charity or victims of circumstance. They were active participants in their own futures, capable of creating change. One evening in late August, Daniel sat in his room writing in a journal that Jennifer had given him. She had encouraged him to document his experiences, suggesting that his story might help others someday. He wrote about the fear he had felt writing that first letter, about the disbelief when Alan Jackson called, about the overwhelming emotion of the festival day. But mostly, he wrote about what he had learned, that asking for help wasn't weakness, it was courage. That one voice, even a quiet one, could make a difference. That home wasn't just a building. It was the people inside it who cared about each other and fought to stay together. His phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. "Advisory Council meeting tomorrow at 4. Don't forget." Daniel smiled and texted back a confirmation. He set down his journal and picked up his CD player, placing the headphones over his ears. Alan Jackson's voice filled his head, singing, "Where were you when the world stopped turning?" But this time, instead of bringing sadness, the music brought gratitude. Gratitude for his parents and the love they had given him in the years they had together. Gratitude for Riverside and the staff who worked tirelessly to care for kids like him. Gratitude for the community that had rallied around them when they needed help. And gratitude for the courage he had found within himself to speak up when it mattered most. Daniel looked around his room, at the bunk beds, the worn carpet, the poster of Nashville that Ashley had made for him. It wasn't fancy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was home, and it was safe. And that was more than enough. Outside his window, the August sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to make a difference. But tonight, Daniel allowed himself to simply be grateful for where he was and how far he and his Riverside family had come. He thought back to that February morning when Mrs. Patterson had announced the home might close, to the fear and helplessness he had felt. If he could go back and tell his younger self one thing, it would be this: don't be afraid to hope. Don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to believe that your voice matters. Because sometimes a humble request from an orphan can change everything. And sometimes, when you reach out for help, extraordinary people reach back.